What is up, guys? This is Comrade64. How you guys all doing today? I'm back with another video. And for this video right here, I'm going to be talking about, I got a really fun video right here. And for this video, today I'm going to be talking about my idea and somewhat pitched idea for a possible Fire Emerald anime series. Now, yeah, Fire Emerald did have anime, back in the 90s, I think, but it was like an OVA. That's all it was. It was like a short OVA. It didn't last very long. You know, I'm not sure how long they last for, but it was short lived. You know, but I had this amazing idea for a possible Fire Emerald anime that could last for like a couple seasons, like very long lasting. And here are the many ways I think this potential anime could probably go. Like, so, Fire Emblem is is a franchise that I like. I think it's cool and awesome, but I'm not particularly like a diehard fan of the franchise. I do think it's kind of cool that the franchise got a resurgence, got a revival, and now has become Nintendo's biggest moneymaker alongside Mario, Zelda, and obviously Pokemon. You know the big juggernaut. Well, I think all four of them. Mario and Pokemon were like the big huge juggernauts, and Zelda too, I guess in a way. And now Fire Emblem is pretty much among them. And I'm pretty sure the other properties like Metroid and Kirby and Donkey Kong are also huge juggernauts, moneymakers for Nintendo as well. You know, and because Fire Emblem, that franchise was pretty much on death's door, apparently. You know, because before Fire Emblem Awakening, not much was really done with the franchise. Fire Emblem was pretty much in the same boat as F-Zero, Star Fox, and Earthbound. Where was this franchise that was just limited. And but then once Fire Emblem Awakening showed up, came out of the blue, that game pretty much kind of saved the entire franchise, basically, And now Fire Emblem is pretty much as huge and popular as it's ever been. We'll be getting new games, since then, And I think it's pretty much kind of cool, you know. And now Fire Emblem has pretty much become very popular. A lot of people love the franchise, and it's pretty obvious that we're going to see a lot more from the franchise in the future. Now, are we going to get like a movie, like an animated movie or a live action movie? Who knows? I assume maybe so. But here's one thing that I think really needs to happen. I think will be cool if it did happen. If Fire Emerald basically got an anime series, you know, kind of like how the Pokemon got an anime series, Kirby got an anime series, F-Zero got an animated series, and even Sonic the Hedgehog, which is a Nintendo property, but it's pretty much kind of now close with Nintendo in a way. Second Nintendo kind of close before they were rivals back in the 90s, but now they pretty much are kind of been close with each other, and I think they have like a friendly rivalry, something like that now. But Sonic seems to work well and close with Nintendo. Yeah, even Sonic got an anime, series in the form of Sonic X. Kirby had Kirby Right Back at Ya, F-Zero had F-Zero GP Legends, and Pokemon had the Pokemon anime that we all know and love, that we all grew up with since the 90s, the very beginning. Me as well, And what's the main reason that kind of helped the Pokemon craze, helped push the Pokemon craze in its entirety back then, Pokemania. And there have been other video game franchises that have got an anime, like from Capcom, Mega Man has had, a couple animes, like Mega Man had an OVA, Mega Man Star, what's called Star, I think is what it's called. Mega Man and Team Warrior, which is based off the Mega Man Battle Network games. And Mega Man Star Force, anime that aired on, the anime aired on Toonami Jetstream, and like Mega Man and Team Warrior aired on Kids WB. So yeah, and also a couple other Capcom properties have had, anime. It's like, Street Fighter has had some animated movies. Well, they're anime. And other video game properties, Fatal Fury, Samurai Shodown, and a bunch of others, many others. You know, and maybe there's some that probably have some OVAs or animes that I'm not even aware of. But now Fire Emblem did have an OVA, like I said before, but you know, it was short lived because OVAs are pretty much are just short lived. They don't even last long. Like the Sonic OVA or the Ninja Turtles OVA, both of those respectively kind of last for like 2 episodes basically. And with the Sonic OVA, when it was brought over here, it was edited to be a movie. You know, that kind of stuff. So OVAs don't even last that long. I remember seeing the Rama one half OVA. So OVAs are pretty much kind of short lived for the most part. But I was wondering, what if Farm World they got an actual anime series? Oh, I also forgot to mention that Star Fox and Kid Icarus both had anime. Star Fox had an anime special called Adventure Begins, something like that. And Kid Icarus had like some anime shorts, that kind of stuff. But that was about it. But what if Fire Emblem had like an actual anime, long lasting anime? And I'm pretty sure there are other video game franchises that do have anime. Oh yeah, the Devil May Cry has an anime. The original anime from the 2000s, and also that Netflix one that people say is anime, but looks more American animation. But that's just me. So yeah, but what if back to Fire Emblem? What if Fire Emblem actually had an actual anime series that was somewhat long lasting, that lasted a lot longer, like had like a couple seasons and such. But here's what I think this potential anime could do. Like if it were to ever happen, each anime can basically be like for this Fire Emblem anime. It can be like if it gets split into seasons. Each season can be like I think this Fire Emblem anime could basically take the JoJo approach, the JoJo's Bizarre Adventure approach. And what I mean by that is like in this Fire Emblem anime, each season will have like a different main protagonist. You know how JoJo's Bizarre Adventure pretty much has each different parts has a different main protagonist, and they take place like years later from each other. You know, something like that. Like what if Fire Emblem did something like that? Like, let's say for the first season of Fire Emblem, Marth is the main character, mainly because He's basically, you know, the first main character of the franchise. And then after him was, I believe, Roy. You know, yeah, because and then after Roy it was Lynn, and then after Lynn it was Ike, and then after Ike I don't know who was next after Ike. I'm looking on my tablet right here, so let's see. Yep, I had it pulled up right here. So Fire Emblem, Shadow Dragon, and the Blade of Light. Yep, that's the game that Marth was in. Marth is the main character of that game. Okay, and so there's this next game, Fire Emerald Gaiden. It has a different main protagonist. I don't know who that is. Fire Emerald Mystery of the Emerald. Oh, Marth is the main character of this game again. You can see him right there. Yep. And then there's Fire Emerald Genealogy of the Holy War. Yep. I think that's Marth. I don't know. Let's see. Yeah, I don't think that's Marth. I think that's some other character. I think it is. It looks like him. I think that's someone else. So yeah, maybe the Fire Emblem anime can probably do something like this, where it takes like each season can be like with a different main protagonist, and like each season can be like based off each of the Fire Emblem games. That's what I think. Like maybe season one can be based off of the first Fire Emblem game. Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light. Yeah, Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon and Blade of Light. Try saying that 5 times fast. Yeah, like what if what if we got that, like yeah, like what if the first season of the Fire Emblem anime is based on that and has Martha as the main character, and the second season could be based off Fire Emblem Gaiden and has whatever the main protagonist in that game as the main protagonist. I don't know who that character is. And then and then uh, yeah, and then like, or maybe they could do like a thing like where they can like skip some games and like you know something like that, or like let's say like for season three, for like a season three Fire Emblem season three, maybe they could have like Roy as the main character, the main protagonist. A season four, Lynn as the main protagonist, or yeah, season five, as I guess the main protagonist, so on, so on, so on, and so forth. That kind of stuff. And like that's what I mean by take the JoJo approach, like or something similar and different in a way, like maybe like I would say maybe the Yu-Gi-Oh approach as well. Because Yu-Gi-Oh, like with JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, is like has like different main protagonists. But with Yu-Gi-Oh situation is kind of different because Yu-Gi-Oh instead of seasons, yeah, it is seasons, but also I guess you could say eras, different eras, like because there's Yu-Gi-Oh, the original Yu-Gi-Oh, Yu-Gi-Oh Duel Monsters, Yu-Gi-Oh GX, Yu-Gi-Oh 5Ds, Yu-Gi-Oh XL, Yu-Gi-Oh Arc 5, Yu-Gi-Oh 7 Veins, Yu-Gi-Oh 7, so on, so on, so on, so on, so on, and so forth, like something like that. And each of these different Yu-Gi-Oh shows, each of them have like their own seasons. Yu-Gi-Oh Duel Monsters ran for I think 5 seasons or probably more. Yu-Gi-Oh, the original Yu-Gi-Oh had like 5 seasons. Yu-Gi-Oh GX had 4 seasons. Only the first 3 got an English dub, unfortunately. The 4th season never got an English dub. I don't know why. And Yu-Gi-Oh 5Ds, I think. I don't know how many seasons that ran for, but that probably had more seasons. And the same with the other seasons, XO had a season 2, yeah, and I think probably had more. So maybe the Fire Emblem anime could probably do something similar to that, where it's like it's like a different version. Like the first Fire Emblem anime series could be Fire Emblem like Origin of Marth. Like that's just like a made up title. That's just like an example title I'm using. Like so yeah, Fire Emblem Origin of Marth, could basically surface around Marth, his story, the games where he's the main protagonist, and then like let's say they made like a new season, a new Fire Emblem season, Fire Emblem Origin of Roy, again that's just a placeholder name, but it's an example name I'm just making, like where it has where it has Roy as the main character. Roy as the main character, or like a season 3, in like a third Fire Emblem anime season series, like Origin of Lynn, or Origin of Ike. I'll probably say Ike because Ike had made appearances in 2 games. Ike, works, and that third season you go series like has Ike as the main character, and it covers Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn. The games where Ike was the main character. Yeah. No, Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn. Those games where Ike was the main character of those games. And then when we can get like Fire Emblem Awakening, and season a fifth, the 4th season that has Ike as the main character. No, I mean that's based around Fire Emblem Awakening, and then so after that a season series based on Fire Emblem Fates, and then one based on Fire Emblem 3 Heroes, and then one based on Fire Emblem Engage. Engage. I guess is what it's called. Something like that. Or and that's for like certain anime Fire Emblem games that they would probably skip. They could probably still add those in some way, shape, or form. Like maybe flashbacks, or maybe in some ways, that's just what I think, because Fire Emblem, I do think I do think Fire Emblem definitely has potential for a long-lasting anime series. You know, this anime series could be to like Fire Emblem what the anime is to the Pokemon series. You know, a long-lasting Pokemon series anime that pretty much is one of the main things that help makes the franchise popular. Because believe it or not, guys, I think we cannot deny that the Pokemon anime did play a huge factor in the Pokemon franchise as a whole being more popular. I think people were more familiar with the Pokemon anime than they were with the Pokemon games, you know. I mean, sure, yeah, the Pokemon anime, it was obviously just a huge marketing for the Pokemon games, but, you know, the Pokemon anime itself was just one of the best shows of all time to ever be created, you know. Because it ran, it ran for a lot of seasons, Ash Ketchum, he's been around for a long time, and recently they just retired the character. I have a different main protagonist, two new main protagonists. I think their name was Lolo and Roy. You know, yeah, Lolo and Roy, something like that. But yeah, and the Pokemon anime is pretty much the main thing that was one of the reasons why the Pokemon franchise became even more popular because the anime pretty much helped with the franchise popularity and was the main source of the anime's popularity. At least that's what I think. If it wasn't for the anime, I mean the Pokemon games, Pokemon as a whole probably wouldn't have been as massively popular it was. As it was. I mean, the games would have been popular, but I don't think it would have been Pokemon would have been like the huge craze as we all thought it was because when one of the first things you think about Pokemon is obviously mainly what without a doubt has to be the Pokemon anime, because the Pokemon anime is just it's very iconic for its time, you know, the Pokemon that was it was one of the reasons why Pokemon was pretty much inescapable back in the day. Why Pokemon was everywhere. Many people talk about the anime, and I think there were more people who talked about the anime more than they talked about the games. But that's just me. That's just what I think. Yeah, that's why I think the Pokemon anime was pretty much the main reason why the Pokemon franchise as a whole became popular. And I think the anime is more popular than the games. At least probably was back then. Or maybe they both were popular equally. But the anime did play a huge factor into why Pokemon became a massive success as it was back then, and even now. Even though some people fall off the anime like after once Pokemon events came around, once they entered the whole league, and then on some even when Sinnoh came around, when Diamond Pearl came around, when they entered Sinnoh League, some like when Home came around, and some when entered the Sinnoh League, Sinnoh. But so me personally, I kind of somewhat fell off a little bit in mid, during the whole like Pokemon Advanced Challenge. I just kind of lost interest, and then I just kind of went back. But it went back later on. Yeah, I kind of went back. But yeah, but I can see like I think a Fire Emblem anime series could probably help the Fire Emblem franchise. I mean, sure, Fire Emblem is so popular, but I think it's probably still somewhat of a niche thing. I don't think Fire Emblem has the kind of huge global status as Pokemon, Mario, and even Zelda. Honestly, I think Fire Emblem still has a dedicated fan base and it still is enjoyed, but you know, but I don't think Fire Emblem is like well known to like casual people. Maybe probably so through Smash Brothers, and that's about it. And maybe the Fire Emblem is so known casually, but I don't think it has like that global fame and well known status as the franchises, Nintendo franchises that I mentioned. But I do think Fire Emblem does have what it takes to maybe reach that fame. So I do think a Fire Emblem anime could definitely do extremely well. And like I said, it could go like the JoJo approach, or maybe it can go like the Yu-Gi-Oh approach and like be like different Fire Emblem animes could be like different eras, like one origin of Marth, origin of Roy, origin of Ike, or origin of Crom. Those are just placeholder names that I have. That's just what it is. You know, yeah, it could be like and each of those can have like run for multiple seasons. Like Origin of Marth can run for like 2 seasons or even more. Based on the games that have Marth as the main character. The second season could either be Roy as the main character or Ike, and the third season can have like maybe I don't know, like Crom as the main character, or maybe these are some ideas I have. Yeah, and like this is kind of something like with Digimon X Wars. Digimon X Wars is looked at as the sixth season of Digimon, but Six Wars in itself kind of ran for 3 seasons separately. Digimon X Wars, also known as Digimon Fusion, it ran for 3 seasons on its own. The first season about Taiki or Mikey, having his friends go into the digital world. The second season is a continuation of that. He goes back to the digital world at the end of the first season, and season 2, like him go through the digital world, and then at the end of the second season, everything pretty much kind of wraps up. And the third season is somewhat like a continuation of the second season, but it has what takes place years later, and it has a different main protagonist. And Mikey, Taiki, he's just there, but he's just in a supporting role. It's kind of like how Tai was in season 2, Digimon 02, where series 01, the first season of Digimon Adventure, he was the main character, and then 02, he was like in a supporting role, and Davis was the main character in Digimon 02, something like that, And also Digimon X Wars, the third season, that never got an English dub, unfortunately. It's a huge bummer. I do kind of wonder what was the reason. I think maybe because Digimon Fusion, the second season, probably didn't perform well, and they probably didn't bothered. I did ask Ben Diskin, who voiced Shoutmon, that question on Twitter, and apparently he said, not to his knowledge, he didn't know. I asked him were there ever plans to dub the third season of Digimon X Wars, and he said, not to my knowledge, something like that. Yeah. But yeah, a Fire Emblem anime could do something like that, like either go the JoJo approach, different season with a different main protagonist, or the Yu-Gi-Oh approach where it splits into different anime shows, like one that has Martha as the main character and that runs for like 5 or something seasons. Second anime that's like continuation, years later. Like the Yu-Gi-Oh animes, they all take place in the same universe, like years later from each other. At least is what. I mean, I think. I don't know if everything else after 5Ds is like canon to each other. I don't know. Alternate universes or something. I don't know. But Fire Emblem, Fire Emblem anime, like a first season and like a second season of Fire Emblem, like could have like like either Roy as the main character and be based on the games where he's the main character, or Ike instead, or maybe like for the second anime you can have Ike as the main character, and maybe Roy, his story can be told like maybe through flashbacks or something. The Fire Emblem anime, it could also maybe take some liberties and make some changes because like the Sonic X anime, the first couple seasons were based off of some Sonic games, like Sonic Adventure and Sonic Adventure 2, and then after that they kind of did their own thing. Well, even before that, the whole thing was about fighting the Chaos Emeralds and fighting against Dr. Eggman's robots and him. So, and then they started to base some stuff off the games. And then, later on, they just, after they did that, the Sonic Adventure 2, then they just kind of did their own thing, and such, And then we got the original season 3, no, I see season 4, with the Metarex saga and such, original, yeah. So I think that the Fire Emblem anime could take some liberties and make some changes, because most of these anime-based video game adaptations do make some changes. Like, the Pokemon anime does make some changes. Kirby Right Back At You makes some changes. FSO GP Legends makes some changes, and others, Sonic X, Sonic X does make some changes. Having Sonic in the characters be present with human characters and such. That kind of stuff. So a Fire Emblem anime could probably do some stuff like that. Maybe add some original characters like Episode GP Legends had some original characters like Rick Wheeler or Ryu, whatever his last name was. He was an original character. He was in the episode games. So Fire Emblem anime can do something like that. But what do you guys think? Do you think a Fire Emblem anime should go like the JoJo approach, or maybe like the Yu-Gi-Oh approach, or some approach like different other animes? Like a JoJo approach with different seasons with a different main protagonist based on each of the games, or it goes to Yu-Gi-Oh approach and like switch to different anime series itself. Like one series is like based on Marth and is run for like 5 seasons. A second season has Ike as the main character. Final series has Ike as the main character, and that runs for a couple seasons itself. And like the third one with Crom, and then another one based on Crom. Quarantine. But then Byleth and such. So and areas and so on and so forth. I just had all these amazing ideas. I think would be cool if they happened. But you tell me and you let me know what you think. And so yeah, or maybe, they could do like thing where it's like they go for seasons, but each season is like is a mess up of different eras. Like season 1 has Marth as the main character, and then at the end of the season has Roy as the main character, and then at season 2 has Lynn as the main character, and then at the end of season 2, I guess the main character, or in season 3, Crom's main character, like roll season 3, and season 4, like it based on Fire Emblem Fates and stuff like that. Well, what do you guys think? Yeah. Well, I think that's all I gotta say. I think I said pretty much a lot. But these are just some amazing ideas that I think that would be cool to see implemented into a Fire Emblem anime series. But you guys let me know what you think. Would you guys like to see any of these ideas happen? Should it go the JoJo approach or the Yu-Gi-Oh approach? You let me know in the comment section below. And yeah, I'll see you guys later. I'm going to be heading out soon. That's it for this video. Feel free to like, share, and subscribe, and all that jazz. I'll have more videos coming out in the future. This is Comrade64. Signing out. Peace out, guys. The soul burns. The sword burns with fire. Take it easy, guys.